Now, Liberty Holdings' share price fell nearly 5% yesterday as the insurer battled to douse the fire caused by a data breach in its IT systems. On Sunday, the financial services company said it had become aware of an attack when an external party alerted the firm that it had seized data from the insurer and threatened to release it if it was not compensated for the hack. A cybersecurity expert has questioned the security measures Liberty put in place prior to that leak, and that has put information of its customers at risk. The Information Regulator has written to Liberty asking questions about its protocols, but what powers does it actually have to enforce any breaches, if any are to be found? We are joined now by the chairperson of the South African Information Regulator, Pansy Tlakula, who's with us in the studio. Good evening to you, and thank you for talking to us.
Good evening.
The first question I must ask you is, how seriously do you take such breaches?
We as the regulator, we take such breaches very, very seriously. Otherwise, we'd be derelict in our duty. This matter is very, very serious. In a way, I wouldn't say that I am pleased about what has happened. But I think the positive spin-off from all this is the fact that the Information Regulator is a very important institution in this country.
Yet, of course, we've seen these kind of breaches before. I mean, last year, for example, in a number of examples, the private information of many South Africans was made available in a way that has compromised them.
Yeah, I mean, from October last year to now, we have seen almost 4, because it was the master did the big Draco major data leak, and then it was followed by Facebook. It was followed by 2 weeks ago by View Finds, the website where people can check whether they have traffic fines or not. That was also hacked. Now we have Liberty Life. So it's happening at a very large scale, I must say, within a very short space of time.
Now, the POPI Act, the so-called POPI Act, the Protection of Personal Information Act, was meant to deal with all of these, but is not yet in force.
It is meant, not was. It's meant to deal with all of this.
Sure.
I think what we need to clarify is that certain sections of the Act have come into operation, and these are the sections that establish the regulator, the ones that stipulates the powers, functions and duties of the regulator, and the ones that mandates the regulator and the Minister of Justice to make regulations. All those are in place. The ones that are not yet in force are the other sections that will give us investigative powers and also enforcement powers.
So in that context, what have you asked of Liberty then?
We want to understand the cause and the circumstances of this leak, because we cannot simply base our information on what we have read in the media. We have to go to the source and ask them the cause and the circumstances. How many people were affected by this data breach? What interim measures have they taken to ensure that there is no further compromise? But most importantly, to just understand how their security measures work, because the Act is very clear that they have to put security measures in place to protect personal information of their customers. Now,
should you be dissatisfied with their answers, is there anything you can do?
No, there is nothing we can't take action against them, because the sections of the Act that would have enabled us to do that have not yet come into operation. But what is important, and we are talking now to all private and public bodies who are processing personal information, they have to ensure that they proactively comply with the Act. If you look at that section that deals with security measures, it actually says, again, that responsible parties have to look at external and internal risks and put in place measures to deal with those or mitigate those risks.
Is this something the legislators have simply not taken seriously enough? We understand now from experts that there's a 1 in 4 chance of such breaches in the South African context.
Well, I think the legislation is quite comprehensive. It compares very, very favorably with the European regulations that were issued in May. So we have a very good piece of legislation.
Sure, but the sections that should give you the teeth, as you say, aren't in force yet. I mean, that must surely be frustrating.
It is very frustrating, and that is why we have seriously been talking to government, because our act says that we appoint our administration in consultation with the Minister of Finance. Yesterday I actually picked up the phone and said to him, you have to assist us because we cannot go on like this. In fact, the lack of operationalization or the delay, they affect the credibility of the regulator.
I know you don't like this word, but it does effectively render you toothless at this stage.
Well, at this stage, but not quite, because wherever we have intervened, the people that we have spoken to have taken action. View fines, we wrote to them on a Friday. Monday morning, we received a response to tell us what they had done to mitigate and deal with the data breach. In fact, Liberty, I wrote to them yesterday morning. By the end of the day yesterday, I already had a response confirming that they are available to meet us on Friday.
I suppose they want to deal with what might come once you do have those teeth. And let's ask you that question. When you are empowered to act, what could you do? What kind of sanction could you impose on parties that you feel are not complying with the regulations?
We have very wide investigative powers. That also gives us the power to issue warrants. We can also issue search warrants, and we also can refer a matter after we have investigated to what is referred to as an enforcement committee. And also it is important to note that non-compliance with the Act can lead to criminal sanctions. It can also lead to civil damages, but also to a fine of 10 million rand. So it's serious. This is going to hit everybody in the pocket.
Serious enough that I'm going to ask you a somewhat of a naughty question, because the IEC, on a story we're running this evening, is also concerned about attempts to hack its systems. And of course, I know you're intimately familiar with how they operate. In your new role as the regulator, I mean, this isn't just about the private sector. This could threaten the very political system of this country.
Certainly. They are processing a lot of personal information of voters. And I think now that this matter is out, we need to discuss with them to just see what security safeguards they have in place, because really that is where this thing lies.
Now, as the regulator, could you slap them on the wrist if they are found to have not complied with your protocols?
We will not even slap them. We have been in discussion with them. There is a matter that we are dealing with the IEC. And the question is whether the way in which they are processing personal information of voters in the voters' roll is in compliance with POPIA, with our Act. We believe that the way that they are processing is excessive, because they have to publish the voters' roll, for instance, for inspection. And what does the voters' roll contain? It contains my name.
It becomes a complicated matter, because of course they have to deal with that constitutional court order that says,
insofar as addresses are concerned, and we're not talking about addresses, we're talking about the ID. They say that we feel that the way that they are processing personal information, at least insofar as the ID is concerned, is excessive. They can collect the ID from the voters because that's a legal requirement. Whether they should publish the ID when they publish the voters' roll, it's an issue that we are in conversation about with them. So now that we are at this point, I think when we meet with them, because we have an outstanding meeting, we'll then have to put this matter also on the table for discussion. It's
no doubt an issue you and I are going to continue to be in conversation about in the coming months. We thank you very much for coming in. That is, of course, the chairperson of the South African Information Regulator, Pansy Tlakula.